For body filler to stick well or bond to the substrate, the metal, it has to have something to grab onto. That means preparing the surface correctly by using a 24 or 36 grit fiber resin disc at a slow speed. To show how surface prep can make a difference, we'll wipe both of these down with wax and grease remover, prepare this side with 24 grit and this side with 240 grit, fill them both, and test to see how well the filler sticks. On both of these, we'll spread a tight coat to make sure we push the filler into the scratches. And we'll just do this first before we spread on about, I don't know, 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch. Okay. We'll let these cure, come back and run a few tests to see how well the filler sticks to each. I gave these a day to harden up, but before we test them, it's good to know the difference between a mechanical bond and a chemical bond. For filler to stick well to metal, it depends on a mechanical bond, and that means it has to grab onto something or lock into the scratches in the metal. These are 24 grit scratches in the metal, and this is the filler. The other type of bond in bodywork is a chemical bond, and that's where two materials actually become one. Here you see the paint and the primer actually become one here where they bond. I have a feeling they're both going to do pretty well, as this is done quite often in a body shop, but usually on smaller areas like dings and maybe hail damage. So we'll bend them both and see how it holds up, and then we'll try to chip it off with a chisel or even an air hammer. So first we'll bend it, and you can see the filler broke and it is chipping off. Let's try the 240, and that broke too, but let's see how it holds up to chipping it off. And you can see it chipped off of there pretty good. And this is a 24 grit. Let's see how the 240 does. And that performed pretty similarly. Let me give you a close-up shot of both of these. Here's a close-up shot of both, and actually they both held up pretty much the same. Now we'll see how it holds up to a sharp chisel and a chisel tip hammer and a pointy hammer. That's the chisel tip. And now pointy. That's the 24 grit. And now the 240 grit. And that did make a difference right there. That's the pointy. And now the chisel. Here's the 24 grit and the 240 grit, and I did notice a large chunk, or a couple of large chunks, did blow off when hitting it with the hammer. Not much of a difference when bending, but there was a difference when hitting it with the hammer. I think a DA with sharp paper on paint works great. The filler has something to grab onto. But what goes wrong is the DA disc, or the sandpaper, hits metal and it dulls very quickly. And then suddenly you're shining the metal instead of scratching it. The fiber resin disc is the most common tool used in body shops for applying filler. A DA with sharp paper can absolutely be used on painted small areas, but it's always good to be aware when any tool is shining the metal instead of cutting it. Filler depends on a good mechanical bond to stick well, and it's good to keep that in mind when deciding on what tools to use when preparing the surface. I hope you enjoyed this video on body filler adhesion. If you did, and you'd like to get my latest videos, don't forget to hit the subscribe button.